Hello, my name is Michael Cook. I am making this video to demonstrate the post-installation process for a video I started recording the other day, but it was a 6-hour long video and I used music in it, so it immediately got blocked by Google. What you're looking at right here is the function that I've been slowly updating and piecing together, and it's more than just a deployment share function. It's 6,000 lines long, covers a lot. I still have a lot more to add to it, but most of this is automating the deployment of infrastructure. Like here, let me go into the server. All of this minus that tool that I was just, or that script deploys all of these. Well, not that one. At this juncture, I cannot show the entire process without it taking several hours, mainly because of the machine that I have. So it's got a dual Xeon E5620s. It's not that fast. I can do quite a bit of the work that I'm doing if I chunk it out, but you know, I think everybody wanted to see how this would work in like a virtual hive cluster scenario. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and shut down. Where to start? Well, without having the utility up. Here, let me go ahead and bring it up. Takes a minute for it to load. It's loading the module, and then it's also loading the GUI. And it loads up, you know, Windows features and services and things like that. So the first run through it takes a minute. It doesn't typically take this long. It should have popped up by now. Alright, so here it is. I showed this off the other day, and mainly, here, I'm just going to populate all the fields and stuff. So that actually gets this current site information and all of that good stuff. And then I would fill in you know, additional zip codes. So I'm just gonna do this for demonstrative purposes. I've already made a video where I'm doing this, but I sort of want to have something to point at to explain what I'm doing. Alright, so that is the current site, so I always end up like taking that out. It's basically a template object so that these other objects can be made. Now if I hit the get button, it'll find all of those things in my Active Directory instance. If they weren't there, it would say exists false, and then I could click new and it'll create everything, and it'll show up in verbose in the console. And then here, this is going to break down that entire network, or possible networks in that range, and that's the control network, so I'm going to remove that. And then here, if I want to inspect these, I can click on it and then see it here. Now I can click load. That'll pull open all of these pieces of information. Now because I put it in the correct order, the network that it just made for each unit in here is correctly associated with what's already deployed. So if I go ahead and hit get, all those items are there. Now I haven't really explained what this is here, and I'm probably going to have a better presentation for this part here, but what this is saying is, hey, I want to create a gateway object in my Active Directory instance here. So it's going to create each of those folder organizational unit. This creates this master organizational unit, and then it creates these sub OUs. That's what all of that is. So I can click false on all of these, and then it'll just create that, as you can see right here. If I were to click, I'm not gonna, but those objects already exist. And we're not. Yeah, okay. I get a little hesitant to use this because this tool is pretty destructive when it's not used correctly or if it's not prepared. But anyway, yeah, all of those items exist, so I don't have to create them. Same thing here. And click get, and it's going to look through Active Directory for all those items. If I do that again, they're all there. Same thing for the servers. Do that. No, crap. Those already exist. Yeah. So I have to fix that, but whatever. I'm gonna reload that. So these are the things that I have to work out before I even demonstrate the tool. Actually, hold on. I'm going to repopulate all of those fields, so give me just a moment here. That's not the wrong one. That's the wrong one. Yeah, if you type in the wrong thing here, it's just going to pull up. It's going to pull up correctly, but it's going to segment them in a different way. Hold on. So even though I'm not creating any of these objects, it's populating the variables in the program with objects that already exist. And now I'm going to log into Hyper-V. Well, I'm not logging into Hyper-V, I'm logging into the server that has Hyper-V on it, which is this. And then once that credential is successful, then I can go ahead and pull whatever, everything that I filled out in the other tabs populates here in this tab. And now I'm going to click Get, and it's going to populate all of those items there. See how they all say true, so they exist. But anyway, I'm going to step past that for a moment here, and then I'm going to show this off here. What I'm about to show here is the image extracting process, which could utilize Windows deployment services. So we go into here, and I click scan. It's going to find all the ISOs in that directory, or that folder, and then I want to mount this. It mounts the ISO and populates all of the included WIM files there. Not sure why that said that. I might actually have to flush the module. Hang on a second. Well, you know what? It's not necessary for me to do that right now. I just wanted to show this GUI here and how all of those items were made. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut this one off, 12020. So I've already prepared that one, and that is the one that's currently running. And then I've also prepared maybe one or two of these, but the rest of them I haven't. I have two workstations that were deployed. So now I'm going to, let's see, 12118. So that's the domain controller, and then this is the gateway. I'm going to minimize all these for now. Actually, it's probably a good time to flush the module. I usually use Windows Terminal, but it doesn't work on Server 2016 or 2019, I don't think. So that's going to install everything. It's sort of like a make utility. It's not. I have to do this same process that I'm doing on there on this machine because I've updated the module, and the deployment method installs the module. The deployment method and the imaging method. And go ahead and close that now. Minimize these. Then once this is installed, be able to open the shell like this. Oh, so you gotta fix that. So that one's not working. As you can see, I feel like I'm playing whack-a-mole with the module because something will work for a while and I'll make an adjustment and then we'll get back to fixing it. Anyway, it's not terribly important. It's just a function that I use to spice up the console. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is, let's see, where did this thing go? Go ahead and get this thing running. I'm going to minimize server manager, and I'm going to open this. I'm going to keep both these consoles open because I'm going to multitask. On this one, I have to do this. All right. Let me do this. it's going to copy all of my images. Or maybe it won't. Wait a second. Did this not? Something's not right. Yeah, it's right there. Why didn't it work? Oh, that's why. Misspelled this. There we go. So while that's going, go on here, module, get FE module, and then module, role, load environment key. So that loads up the icons, and it does also pull in the background file and stuff like that. It's basically pulling from the master share. That image right there is the background that I just loaded, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The function always works, but it is the evaluation version of Windows, so you can't customize the desktop. Sometimes the desktop will still change regardless of that, is what I meant. Now, I'm going to wait to put that in. Get MDT module. Now this is going to install the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, as well as Win80K and WinPE, which that takes about 20 minutes, and so does pulling the images here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get WDS configured, which I have to do manually until I figure out a way to I don't know. Configuring WDS from the command line is sort of a pain in the neck. Not the entire thing from the command line. I can do some of it. But what I can't do is change the PXE settings and all that. So now I have 3 terminals open. I sort of have to wait for this to finish, actually. So I think I'm going to wait. I can continue doing what I'm doing once this first image makes its way on here. With WDS, you need to load up installation image and whatnot. pretty difficult to automate this part here. Okay, so now I'm gonna rename this. And then mount it. Actually, I'm going to unmount it because I want to do all this from the console. What? Okay. and that initializes Windows Deployment Services. Which I could have done from the GUI, but I wanted to do it from the command line, and there are other commands I'm going to put in here. Anyway, this is just about done with copying the images. This is just about done installing WinPE. Maybe that was the first image, or the second image that it just finished. Not too sure what this is doing. It doesn't usually take that long. Alright, well, it's probably installed, or more initialized. Now what I'm going to do is group get AD organizational unit, filter that, name match environment computer name dot split. Try to use variables to do all this. Of course, I can't see what I'm typing while I'm looking at the other screen. Just looking for through Active Directory to get the name of the gateway / site. So that's the name of the gateway. And now, new WS image install image group. Okay, now, excuse me, image name. Using a little bit of regex there. Typically, we just get the name of the WIM file and then type it in. But for whatever reason, the thing that shows up in here, let me pull it up. So it doesn't actually work with those image names. It like changes it for whatever reason. Anyway, I'm not going to jump into that. And this is done, so I can close that. Now that's importing it to WDS. It's one reason why I could use a slightly better server. I feel like most of the time that I'm doing this is because I'm just waiting for this thing to do its work. Okay, so it's not running. So it did work. I don't know why it kicks off an error like that, but let me go back to this. So I can dismount the image. And then, because there's some type of issue with the Windows Server 2019 version of WDS, oh. So that's basically done there. Okay, so those files are ready. That's done. Add DHCP server in DC, which I might move to the other portion of the script. And DHCP server security group. Now what I want to do is okay, so this got pretty much everything I need to get things off to a rolling start here. Now I'm going to go in here, configure this. And this is mechanical. This is where I'm going to want the computers to be deployed to an Active Directory. Alright, so now I can go ahead and close that and this. And launch the GUI. Oh, I never installed the features. So it's going to install NuGet and PoshRS job. All right, now I can run it. So this GUI gets everything needed to launch the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit and to set up FEDeploymentShare. So I'm not going to do anything with the other tabs. So now I populated everything in there because I want everybody to see how cool the graphics look in the console. I'll move that over. Now I'm going to select that because why not? And dismount. Select the next one. and select education and pro. You used to select home all the time, but it doesn't work on a domain. The rest of them do. You can install the home edition on a domain, but what will happen is MDT will restart the computer like 4 times, and then they'll say, "Oh, couldn't join the domain." Rather than to just include that, I figure it just takes less time than not have it in there. Alright, so now I know that's a question mark, I keep forgetting to fix that. It's supposed to be the down caret. Nope, it's the wrong one. You can name it whatever you want, but I like to use that. And now this is going to go ahead and extract all of those ISOs from the images. So actually, it remounts the ISO and then it extracts it. So in order to get all of these in order, they have to be mounted and then properly put in order. Now, just to show what the process is doing right now, I'm going to go over to this folder. It's going to create a WIN file for each of these indexes. So 5 of them are selected. One is selected from the Windows Server 2019. And the other 2 have 2 images, or 2 WIN files to extract a piece. Takes a few minutes. All of these things take a bit of time, so making a pretty short presentation has been pretty difficult, or impossible rather. Unless I were to, cut all the pieces like this guy Bernard from BTN HD. I know for a fact he does all of this stuff too, but he will zoom in certain portions and then edit the whole continuous video, which I guess is just a different approach. I learned a lot about MDT from his videos. He's been doing this for a pretty long time, I would imagine. not sure what's going on here. Type B just crap out on me. Pause critical. Okay. It's because my hard drives are full. Crap. Man. Well, looks like I'm gonna have to get rid of that one, 1029, and then all right. Let me get rid of 1029, 1020. Why do that in Active Directory or PowerShell? So normally before I run the GUI, I like use this to clean everything up. So I just removed it from Active Directory. And now what? Okay, well, Oh yeah, this doesn't actually do any of that. It's not open. Dude. There we go. Freed up like 150 gigs. So each of these is pretty hefty. I probably could use the network share there. I haven't thought to try that yet. But I would imagine that's probably what SCSI is. Or does. Or not SCSI, SCSI, that's what I meant. About an hour so far. So it's the last one that it's about to extract, and then I can show the deployment share portion, and then install from it. I'm not sure what it's doing right this second. It should not be stuck. It's probably because it ran out of space. I had to delete those files. Oh, it was because of that. Okay, so now I can go over to here and create a new deployment share. Now I'm going to add the review computers. So this is mechanical. At some point I'm going to have the selection thing that was seen in the WDS portion, or at least maybe I can make it so that it pulls from the same thing. I don't know. So this just pulls all of the things from the domain key that I installed earlier, or the environment key. But the default, it'll go to the default if nothing's selected, which is the stuff in the module. There's the badge. Oh yeah, I don't have those hooked up yet. Anyway, add that, and then create. So now it's going to inject everything that it just created into MDT. So it's creating a deployment share and it's injecting it with the WIM files. And then it's also setting defaults for the share. And then it immediately pushes it right through to create boot images. This process takes about 10 minutes. When this process is complete, it will deposit the boot images into WDS. So that's why I did not install boot images in WDS. And then once this is complete, it will close the GUI and I will install a couple of workstations in Hyper-V from this particular server. The actual MDT workbench has a console in it, and it displays basically everything that's seen here. So now I completed the x86 version. Now it's going to process the x64-bit version. Might not even really need to do the x86 version anymore, since well, for physical machines you would need that because some of them are still x86 based. It's basically single core. When I managed the computer shop, it still had a number of machines that ran on x86. I haven't done anything with getting that to load up that. The files are there whenever I'm ready to do that. The difference between the two is that PSD is the PowerShell deployment method, which guys from Deployment Bunny and Mr. Nyhouse were working on at some point or another. I think they have a working version that's been off for a while. I haven't checked it out yet because it makes the boot images much larger, and it takes even longer to create the boot images. So that's why I never really got into working with the HTA file or script, which is what I tried to start doing that first back in January of 2019, 2.5 years ago. And the main reason I never got around to it is because of how complicated it is. Although I've learned quite a bit by looking at their scripts and whatnot. At some point, once they update the components that go into building the boot images, and it supports PowerShell 5, and it doesn't make the boot images obscenely larger, and maybe I'll focus on that. I'm trying to do all that. It's pretty complicated because then I have to start doing C++ and opening the MS build stuff. It's not too different from what I'm doing or what I've already done. I'm not a huge fan of C++, even though a lot of what I write is virtually identical. So anyway, now it's injecting the files into WDS, which I'll show that. And then it's restarting the service. And then there's a cool little flag. And then close the GUI. So we're going in here. There they are. And the date is right there. And the time. Boom. Anyway, I'm going to minimize that. Now I'm going to create a couple of virtual machines. I don't think it's going to make much of a difference to double the RAM. Well, anyway, the GUI, the first few tabs, it creates a switch along with the gateways, which is featured in the other video. It's like 6 hours. So now it's going to automatically boot. So that's the WIM file that just imported into WDS. Not sure why this one's still taking a minute to load. Probably don't need to show two workstations doing this, but whatever. So now you can see all the images there. If I wanted to install the data center edition, I could do that. And then spin up additional servers or whatever. I should probably explain this part. Let's say this was a physical computer I was booting from the network or whatever. I could use this to move the data that exists on the machine in a similar manner to Laplink PC mover, and then you could restore the data. So like, you know, if I'm trying to restore a save that I already made, and then I would use that, which I've yet to get around to. So here's a loadout of how it's going to install and propagate. Now there are a number of options that aren't included, like you know, BitLocker and this, that, and the other thing, which at some point when I'm ready to finish with a process where you can select what you want to add and remove, like the bootstrap and custom settings INI files, then you'll be able to add those options. Alright, so this process is going to take a bit, so I'm going to load this up. Is it I want this one. Right. Yeah, that'll work. trying to make this presentable. Not the easiest thing in the world to do. It's too much information to try to show. Well, that's finishing up. I should probably go over this function actually. Alright, so this thing's like 7,000 lines long. Starts out looking to see if it's a server, looks to see if it's running core. If it's not, if it's running the desktop version, it'll continue. If it isn't, then it'll say, oh, you gotta use that. It's got a class for the states, for the US, so it can convert or it's meant to get the state name or province name. I don't know why all these are all the same or whatever. And then it makes a zip code entry, a stack of zips, so it pulls from the database file that I parsed. And now it gets into the network scope action, which is bits and pieces of the function in the video that I made back in January of the GUI building process. This does mainly the IPv4. At some point I will get around to the IPv6 stuff, but that's relatively much simpler. And now it gets into the DC topology and domain topology. So all the things on the first tab of the GUI. In fact, why don't I pull that up? So the DC topology goes to all of that. The network topology is for the next tab. For all that. A site is essentially the combination of those. Sitemap. So all of these. If I were to click on one of these, originally it would show me all of that information, which combines the domain and the network side. The branch is basically this down there. The template item is that. This is an offshoot of the this. Some of these classes do look almost identical, but this has a couple more fields. And even if it has a couple more fields, it still needs to be restated as a class. And then it's got the share, so everything that shows up in this box here is the share. These classes aren't in the same logical layout as in the GUI because I added a whole bunch of stuff in between. Certificate is essentially what I want to get back around to so that I can distribute the certificates to each of the items, which I'm not doing at the moment, but the domain runs off of one outward facing gateway and it propagates that certificate to each thing within the domain, sort of like ADCS, Active Directory Certificate Services, which I'm eventually going to get around to completing all that. VM select and VM test is basically testing to see if the VMs in particular are there. This is essentially so that when I log into the server in Hyper-V, that it can pull the correct stuff. So like it'll pull the switch. If it's not the local machine, then it needs a credential to sign into that machine that the virtual host is on, like Hyper-V. VM object is basically each of the items in, let's see, each of the items in this tab, or not this tab, VM controller goes to the, never mind. VM select and VM test. That's for those. And move to the next tab. And now this is VM object is all these. Or no, this is also VM test. But these create the objects in Hyper-V. When you click new, it actually runs through the whole process of creating the switches and the gateways and the domain controller objects, and trying to make it modular so that if you just want to make the switches and the gateways, you could do that, and then use physical machines. I don't know. I realize a lot of this is pretty daunting, but it all needed to be done in order to emulate System Center. And now image label, image slot, image file, image stack. It's basically extracting the WIM files from the ISOs. Xamarin window is just a class to populate all the items in the GUI. I don't know why I didn't think to minimize some of these as I was going through. These are still installing, so I'm not missing out on anything. And in case anyone watching is wondering, yeah, I did program all this myself. That includes the GUI stuff, which I'll show you in a second. So DG list is, can't think of a situation where it's being used here. Domain in this class isn't even really being used, so I might as well delete it. Sitemap key, that's being used. That's for the environment key. WIM file is being used by the process to I forget. I know it's being used, but I can't remember exactly where it's being used. I think it's being used in the part where it builds the deployment share, or injects all of the items into the deployment share. And the boot image, that's meant to basically manage the ISO, WIM, and XML files that are created by the update deployment share. And that's just a grouping of the boot images. And then here's the GUI portion, which is about 1,400 lines long. I use a lot of group boxes and data grids. And I also use a lot of styling, which in like CSS, a lot of this would be in the main CSS file, but XAML sort of merges HTML tags and styling. Still have to get around to stuff in these tabs. So like eventually at some point when I determine what values in the registry or in the GUIs for each of these utilities needs to be modified in order to configure everything down to a T, it's going to have all the settings here, so that instead of having to open each individual thing in Server Manager or install this or install that, the program will query everything, and then it'll basically be able to run off of I don't know, defaults, or maybe you could load an XML file. I haven't really gotten to that part, but I know that I want to have access to tabs in that manner, and that it installs all of these. And now VM stack is essentially being able to control all the VMs and the switches. In this main class here, it sort of throws everything all into one class. So it's not too different from running a main function in a C# program, where it just, compiles everything. And then when it runs, it's going to check for all those services. It's going to check to see if MDT, WinADK, and WinPE are installed, and if they're not, then it'll say that, and you won't be able to create a deployment share. So it's actually more inclusive than the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, believe it or not. It's probably more accurate to say that it is closer to System Center. Anyway, yeah, I don't know why that's showing up like that. I use this still to there. It's gonna take a while to load. It's still loading. The only reason it's taking so long is because it's installing from virtual server, and the machine that I'm running this on isn't that fast. Anyway, it's loading all the classes I just went over in here. All of these sections I wrote like this so that I could have an idea of what properties I need to edit. All the data grids are essentially arrays, and they need to be initialized and stay in an array. Otherwise, it crashes the GUI. Persistent drives. It's looking for the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit to load before it does anything else. The main tab. These are all the properties. So you can see we got a 40 activity on there. The labels, they all match up with the variables, and I did that intentionally because at some point I'm going to change all of that. This is all the logic, which probably doesn't look a heck of a lot different than C++, but yeah, everything runs off of the two variables. Yeah, concatenates all the classes and stuff into these two variables, and most of the utility runs off of that. But yeah, let's see. What I wanted to show is this. So I just ran through each of the items in the XAML and, you know, output what type of object it is. Helps to keep things organized for me, I've found. It looks like this is finally getting into Windows, but it still takes another like 10 minutes. Because the programs that it installs. Should probably change that. I'm not going to go over all of these, but some of these touch on functions that are in the main function, like remove subnet, get network, add subnet, load network, new domain, get domain. It get pretty confusing after a while looking at all of these different functions and methods. There's a reason why these happen outside of that class. It's mainly because the XAML can't be included in a class. It has to remain in a function or in a variable. And just because I use this network here doesn't mean that other network strings can't be used. Yeah, you're looking at something that took me several months to put together. It took me even longer to really master the class-based approach and to have these techniques down to where, I don't know, I can take a string of information and split it with regex and then, you know, populate a data grid with a custom class and then assign it a variable and then populate it into a data grid, and all these little tips and these tricks that I use. Probably bound to impress somebody. And server items, virtual. This is the newest tab that I just added like a couple weeks ago. Trying to conceptualize all this is a pain in the neck because I know what I'm trying to do, but making it simple enough to fit in a GUI is complicated actually. So is naming things. Things that I learned along the way. Clicking on these buttons opens a external Explorer, File Explorer. So if I do this, see, and now this is basically the part that I've been spending most of my time doing over the last month. Actually, it's probably been about a month since I made that portion there, the GUI for the virtual tab. Anyway, creates virtual switches, however many gateways are in there. As you can see, it's running off the main virtual.gateway, and then it creates the gateways, and then it creates the servers. And if I wanted to add on another tab for workstations, I could add that there, and then it would make those. And then it launches them all so that they pull a MAC address, and then it adds a DHCP reservation for each of the things in the list. And then once that's done, then a message box pops up asking if you want to install the gateways in Hyper-V, and then it actually installs them. But all of this will be replaced by where are you? All of that will be replaced by VM gateway script. The only reason that it isn't is because for whatever reason I couldn't get this to work the way I wanted it to. This spins up all the threads simultaneously using Posh RS job, written by none other than Boprox, a guy that's been doing this stuff a lot longer than me. And then this part creates a template for each of the server objects, and then after that it's supposed to launch this, but this was actually getting stuck, so I was trying to run it without that, running each of them individually like I did in the video that has the music in it. But anyway, yeah, as far as the gateways are concerned, this goes through and installs the gateways using Hyper-V keyboard. I had to create a custom function so that it could actually input into a non-Windows machine, or passwords and stuff. And the way that it's written, the password isn't in the script. The default passwords are, but that's it. Everything else runs off of the input from the GUI. Basically everything runs off of the GUI. And then once it's done installing each of those gateways, then it will spin up this other VM to configure them with a web browser. And it runs through each individual one and deposits the information. It has to change the IP address and the DNS and gateway for each gateway that is installed. But let's say that you wanted to install 256 different networks. Well, this will rotate through all of them successfully, unless there's some sort of interruption. The idea was to make it consistent for each one. So if it worked on one, then it should work on the next one, and then once it's done, it will restore the original information, connect itself back to the original network it was on, and then it closes it out, deletes everything, and shuts the computer off back to the state it was already in. Then it shuts down all the gateways and moves on to the next portion, where it installs a server. For each server that gets started up, it will launch the server, and then it will also relaunch the switch so that it has internet access or network access. And then it proceeds to install Active Directory. Well, it installs Windows Server 2019 from the image using Hyper-V. And then once the installation is done, then it pulls out the DVD. Then it boots for the first time. It uses an entropy timer in order to get it escape from an idle state. And then it logs in and begins to interact with the server. Enters in the password. It's the first login screen. Enters the password. Joins the network. Runs PowerShell. Closes server manager. I think that's what that is. Maybe that's Alt-Tab. No, 918291. Can't remember what that's for. It runs a server manager. Oh, it's a Windows key. Windows R, I think. It tells server manager to stop as a redundancy, because it does that up above. It sets the display resolution, changes the IP address information and all of that stuff. Exports everything to a server.txt file. I might have to change that location. And then it installs some modification, fighting entropy. Takes a couple minutes to do that. Then it joins it to the domain and sets the machine name and everything, and then it reboots the machine, and then it logs back in after it reboots. It's joined the domain, logs back in, and now it deploys DHCP in that portion. Then it reloads the variables so that it doesn't have to re-enter everything that was already entered. Then it splats a parameter for DHCP. It sets the content, invokes an expression, and then adds a DHCP for scope. Gets the configuration information so that it can get the MAC address for setting a DHCP reservation for the gateway there. And then it sets the option IDs, the default option IDs, which I have to kind of tweak these because I'm not entirely sure. I want to keep them the way they are. And then basically primes everything for DHCP and DNS. And then it installs Active Directory Domain Services, RSAT, DHCP, DNS. Well, it already has DHCP installed, but you know, whatever. It pulls that from the module in order to install the correct template, sort of like desired state configuration would do. Then it imports the ADDS deployment module, enters in a password so that the domain can then be joined. And then it splats a parameter for ADDS install domain controller, and then it promotes it to a domain controller, and then it reboots, and then once it has joined the domain and it gets to the login screen, then it says, okay, time to turn myself off along with the switch, and then it's done. So that whole portion is all that. The imaging tab is right here. So these data grids are all in need of being leveled out with those array declarations. And then I think I've shown this in this video that I'm recording, but you know, I actually modified a lot of this last night. I made a new class. I actually had a bunch of different classes that relied on functions that I had already made, but I decided to scrap them and sort of start over, which I do that a lot. I will write something and then a week later I'll say that sucks, time to rewrite it, and I spend quite a lot of time rewriting the same thing. But you know, some people will say, why do you do that to yourself? Well, take a good look at what you're looking at. Obviously there is something to be learned with refining something over and over. I learned a lot of techniques that I would have never learned from asking people for assistance all along the way. It's not to say that I haven't learned from people that were trying to help, but you know, this mounts the disk image and extracts the web files. Excuse me. And then it sets the tag so that, you know, the version yeah, I don't think I have WIM files on here. That's alright. I'm getting close to the end of this script here. The updates tab I need to finish, but essentially this will be able to inject MSU files into the images so that you don't have to do any post installation of the updates, which I was doing a lot of that work prior to the video I made back in 2019 when I was in Bennington. I made a recording in May of 2019 in Bennington, and the process that I showed that day didn't include like a fraction of everything I've shown off in this video, even though this process where it deploys the image and injects everything into MDT, that was working, but that all went to the back burner while I had to brush up with Active Directory and all that. And then finally the share tab, which, you know, the most important part of this whole utility, which isn't being used for the deployment of the routers, the gateways, and the servers, because it's using it's using a disk image to install them. But at some point all of these things will be able to be installed from a main centralized system, not system center, but a centralized system that looks a lot like System Center. It won't be called System Center. It'll probably be called Infrastructure Deployment System. I've been thinking about what else to call it other than deployment share, because it's a lot more than just deployment share. I don't know if that was easy or obvious to tell. I still have to finish that. This is just about done, by the way. Let's see, how long is this video now? 2.5 hours? 2 hours and 18 minutes. So, even in the last video that I made in May of 2019, this whole process was a lot faster. But that's because this just installed itself from a virtual machine that was made from this utility that I just showed. on a machine that's like 12 years old. So back in January of 2019, I had a process at the computer answer shop installing Windows in 3 minutes flat. I don't even know how I was able to do that. I mean, I know the things that I did to be able to get the speed improved, but I had a server that was dual NICed to a gigabit Ethernet Catalyst 2950, I think. Cisco Catalyst 2950. I don't think it was a managed switch. Unmanaged. And then I had a workstation that had a Intel 8000 or 9000 series CPU. Probably an 8000 series CPU. And it had an NVMe drive in it. So I was able to get like 800 megabytes per second in the transfer speed during installation. Which this is not doing anywhere near that speed. So that's why it's taking as long as it is. But it's a lot less involved. Everything that I did in the GUI in the beginning of this video, well, sort of towards the middle of it, spawned all of that. And this is the part that I wanted to talk about while the video was going. So, alright. In order to create the deployment share, it's got to pull the host name, it's got to create a Samba share, and then a PS drive, and then add a MDT persistent drive. So like the MDT module needs to be loaded in order to do that. And then to change the share properties, you need to have all of these set the way that it is. The module right here isn't really needed for a heck of a lot in this. The fighting entropy module is not needed for very much in this portion of the script, but having it allows me to use the graphics from the module. Or I don't know. This part creates a deployment share key so I can reload all of that stuff, which is sort of what I was doing in the original video back in May of 2019, although I had a much different approach. Then the key background, the key logo. So the GUI, you can select your own background or logo, or you can not do that. It's better to use them than not use them. For a little computer icon, a PXE, so the pi symbol, and then this copies over the templates. This writes out the deployment share key to a CSV file. And then it collects the images. That's the part. So that's where that class is being used. So it collects all of the WIM files from within that path, and then it directly injects them into MDT. So it imports the operating system and a task sequence. It creates a task sequence. A task sequence that doesn't need to be edited. You load this module and then it kind of shoestrings everything else. Whether you have a server image or a client image or only a client image, it will look through each of the images, and then it will create a folder based on the build number and whether it's a client or server. So if I open up MDT, still saying version 7, but it's version 8. Yeah, it looks in the images and then it sees the build number and builds it appropriately. Since I'm using the evaluation center, the server, it's still got the original build number. Windows Server 2019 is, I think that's the original build number there, and then this is the build number for 21H1. But yeah, it creates a it imports the operating system, and then it basically mirrors those things to this folder here. So if you want to install a different version, then you can. And then if I go to properties, rules, oh wait, this has got old information. I gotta fix that. Anyway, it runs through all of the task sequences and injects stuff there accordingly. I don't know why it's still saying the old version of the module, but everything else seems to be updated. At any given moment, I can you know, tear apart the share and then rebuild everything, and then the information that's in those bootstrap files that may have gone stale won't work anymore. So if someone runs across the password they had in a old bootstrap file, think a try. It might not work. Unless I don't know. I thought about a number of things when making this to try to make it so that everything revolved around the login. This right here, I need to get around to making it so that users can customize that as well as the bootstrap stuff, because someone may want to change all of that. And the function that I started making, where is it? Oh, there it is. So I have to make the function for that and that. Anyway, that is basically it. There's probably a lot of information. This is done. This is done. I really don't know why, but one of them tends to work and the next one won't for the background. And it's also missing the edge icon on this one too. So I don't know. It's pretty consistent with the inconsistency there. Let's see. I should be able to ping these now. I also remote desk. Well, if I can ping them, I can do pretty much everything else. But let's say I wanted to run remote desktop from my main computer here. Maybe I can't. Should be able to. I might have to change the let me try from this one. Yeah, I guess not. Oh, I can ping them. Let's see if I can. Let's try to reboot them. Maybe it just needs to be rebooted after it's done. Might have to edit the group policy object a little more. Okay, so it works within the network. It doesn't appear to work between the networks, so that's probably okay for the time being. I think that all I would need to do is just change the group policy object, and then I could access them and whatever. But I can still, let's see. Probably just a matter of fine-tuning the protocols that it's allowing through, because I can ping it. Yeah, it's getting the correct IP address and everything, so it's got to be what I think it is. Anyway, that's going to do it for the video. Hope you enjoyed. Feel free to hit the thumbs up button if you liked what you saw. And feel free to subscribe for more content. Over and out.